They tried to tamper with you like you were just another glitch in the matrix, like you were naive enough to fall for the bait, to get reactive, to throw your crown on the floor and roll around with hyenas who feed on chaos. But you didn't. You didn't stain your soul just to get even. You didn't take the shortcut to vengeance. And because of that, something divine twisted in your favor. Not because you were passive, but because you were strategic. They watched you walk through hell without cursing a single name. They heard silence where they expected screams. And the universe, it watched too. You passed every test designed to sabotage your character. So now, the karmic algorithms recalibrated, and your protection package got upgraded to Premium Plus. You earned divine security clearance, not through prayer, through discipline. You didn't argue when you had proof. You didn't clap back when they lied through their teeth. You let them rot on their own timeline while you healed in sacred privacy. And that, right there, shifted your frequency. You walked through emotional war zones with a surgeon's precision. You stitched your own wounds while they built altars from your name. And still, you didn't fight dirty. You didn't need to. Because when you carry clean karma, you don't need a plan. You are the plan. You don't get tangled in other people's panic. You become the chaos that dismantles their illusion. You stop trying to explain yourself to people addicted to misunderstanding you, and in doing so, you became untouchable. That's what protection feels like. It's not a shield, it's a presence. A presence that moves through rooms before you speak. A kind of divine insulation earned by surviving betrayal without poisoning your own tongue. Understand this: when your karma is clean, the universe becomes aggressive about your boundaries. Doors slam shut for you without warning. People get exposed in ways you didn't orchestrate. Those who tried to destroy your name start self-sabotaging in public. That's not coincidence. That's a spiritual firewall. You don't even have to lift a hand. Your calmness becomes the executioner. That's the terrifying beauty of elevated energy. It doesn't need confrontation. It radiates discernment, and everyone who once thought they got away with it suddenly feels watched. Because they are. Not by you, by the very forces they pretended didn't exist. And the more you mind your business, the more theirs implodes. You're not petty, you're protected, and that unnerves people who were only ever powerful when you were confused. They were counting on you to retaliate. That was the trap. If you retaliated, they'd feel justified. If you raged, they'd play the victim. If you exposed them, they'd say you were obsessed. But you knew better. You knew that some people weaponize guilt the way others use daggers. So you chose patience. Not the weak kind, the venomous kind. The kind of patience that outlasts every narrative. The kind of restraint that makes people confess without interrogation. You let karma do the knocking. You stopped explaining and started evolving. And that evolution, that's what triggered your upgrade. Your aura became too expensive for cheap games. You stopped taking disrespect personally. You started seeing it as a filter, one that removed the unworthy from your path. And in return, the universe made your presence allergic to betrayal. You became a spiritual firewall, not because you chanted affirmations, but because you practiced integrity under pressure. When people slandered you, you cleaned your mirror instead of throwing dirt. When they sabotaged you, you chose stillness over spectacle. And in doing so, you raised your karmic credit score to elite status. Now, situations that once broke you bounce off your field like rubber bullets. The universe doesn't just protect people with clean hands. It avenges them quietly. You became an example, and examples don't need explanations. You walk in alignment, and the universe rearranges timelines for your favor. That's why they can't understand how you keep winning. You're no longer playing their game. You're living in a different algorithm, one that rewards restraint with revelation. Psychologically, your refusal to get dragged into their mess destabilizes their entire strategy. Manipulators need chaos. They need you to react, to stumble, to prove them right. But when you refuse to fall for their bait, when you held eye contact with demons and didn't blink, they lost control, and that loss triggered panic. Because your clean karma didn't just reflect your choices, it exposed theirs. You became a spiritual contrast. Your grace made their dysfunction stand out, and suddenly, everyone started noticing the patterns you were too dignified to speak about. That's the power of divine protection. It's quiet, surgical, and humiliates your enemies without your fingerprints on the blade. You didn't have to do anything. Just breathe, and the truth started bleeding from every lie they told. People don't understand that spiritual elevation has a cost. You paid in silence. You paid in restraint. You paid in nights where you wanted to scream, but chose reflection instead. And now, that investment pays interest in ways they can't comprehend. You didn't lose people. You were cleared of them. You didn't fall behind. You were repositioned. You didn't suffer in vain. You were retrained. So when the blessing started multiplying and the energy around you became too intense for liars to stand next to, they called it luck. But it was never luck. It was divine compensation. The universe doesn't forget who stayed silent while others tried to destroy you, nor does it forget who laughed when you blawed. Your karma is pure, and now your circle is curated by forces greater than you. You don't attract opportunities anymore. They orbit you. This level of protection is earned. You pass tests they didn't even see coming. The kind of tests that don't reward theatrics, only discipline. And now, the universe guards you like a diamond mined from volcanic pressure. You became too rare to be handled recklessly. So reckless people start falling off. Not because you cut them, but because your frequency became allergic to their intentions. They're suffocating now, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. Your silence became proof. Your distance became diagnosis. And they're panicking because you're calm. They're spiraling because you're unavailable. That's divine protection in full effect. A shield disguised as solitude, a blessing hidden inside boundaries. So no, you're not cold, you're not ruthless, you're upgraded. And upgrades come with new security measures. Not everyone can access you now. Not everyone gets to know the new version. You're a restricted frequency. The locks have changed. The room has been blessed. And anyone who tries to bring confusion to your doorstep finds themselves blocked by walls they can't scale. That's the reward for walking through betrayal without dragging others through the mud. You moved like a king, like a queen, like a sovereign force that doesn't negotiate with chaos. And in doing so, the universe took notes, then took sides. They wanted to manage your perception because controlling your identity gave them power, not truth, not reality. Just control. You were never supposed to know who you truly were. You were meant to live inside the version they subtly sculpted for you. One that kept you small, apologetic, predictable. They whispered corrections into your confidence, laughed when you spoke with fire, offered passive-aggressive feedback that slowly decayed your self-trust. They planted seeds not to grow you, but to distort you. Every compliment came with a hook. Every criticism came wrapped in false concern. They wanted you to see yourself through their filtered lens, warped just enough to keep you uncertain, needy, dependent. Because people who don't know their own power are easier to bend. They didn't need to control your behavior. They just needed to shape the way you viewed your own. Their goal wasn't dominance through force. It was infiltration through doubt. When you questioned yourself, you deferred to them. When you got confused, you sought their approval. That was the game. Gaslight, then guide. Undermine, then advise. Insult, then console. They wanted to be the villain and the savior in your life. The one who wounds and the only one who offers a bandage. That cycle is psychological warfare. It isn't messy. It's meticulous. It's engineered in subtle looks, small sighs, delayed responses. They never said you were weak. They just made you feel weaker every time you shined. And over time, you shrunk just to fit their comfort level. Perception is power, and they studied how to weaponize yours. They figured out early that your mind was sharp, your instincts potent. That terrified them, so they created distractions, emotional static, unsolicited doubt. They redirected your inner compass slowly, like a pilot adjusting trajectory 1 degree at a time. Until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person reflected back, not because you were broken, but because you were buried under layers of projection. They didn't just lie about you to others. They lied about you to you. That was the masterstroke, convincing you to doubt your own reflection while they pulled the strings behind the curtain. Your growth threatened the illusion they built. Every time you got stronger, the narrative wobbled. Every time you spoke with clarity, the image they crafted fractured, so they moved fast to keep your perception dim. They wanted you to second-guess your instincts, rewrite your emotions, apologize for your truth. They wanted you to label your boundaries as cruelty, your insight as arrogance, your detachment as betrayal. Because once they convinced you of that, they no longer had to manipulate you. You did it to yourself. You became your own warden, guarding a prison they built but never had to maintain. That's the brilliance of psychological projection when done well. The victim enforces their own sabotage. They didn't expect you to wake up. That was the risk they took. That was the flaw in their equation. Because people can only be missiled for so long before the silence turns into vision. One day, you stop needing their validation to interpret your reality. You stop needing their permission to feel anger, to feel pride, to feel sure. You started listening to the quiet intelligence inside you, the one they told you was overreactive, dramatic, unstable. And when you did, the spell broke, the fog lifted, and the mirror, the real one, showed up again. You saw the design, the pattern, the manipulation not as chaos but as a plan. And that awareness, that's what made you dangerous. They panic now, not because you're loud, but because you're clear. You see the mechanics. You recognize the script. You watch them talk, and you no longer hear their words. You hear the agenda beneath it. You stopped being seduced by tone. You read intention now. And nothing terrifies someone more than losing control of a narrative they spent years trying to perfect. They can no longer manage your perception, and without that power, they are small. Not in size, but in influence. Their greatest weapon was confusion, and you, in becoming self-aware, disarmed them entirely. They try to keep up, of course. Old tactics disguised as evolved advice. But you don't bite, you nod, you watch. You catalog. Because now, you understand the game, and because you understand, you can't be played. Your perception has become self-sourced, not crowdsourced. You no longer outsource your reality to people who benefit from your instability. And that's what makes your presence unbearable to manipulators. You mirror them now, not their image, but their intentions. You reflect their shadow. And when people see your light, they notice the distortion in others. You didn't just reclaim your perception. You exposed the ones who tried to script it. This clarity you now carry, it's expensive. It cost you innocence. It cost you comfort. But it returned your identity, your alignment, your intuition. You walk now with a gaze that sees through masks, hears the lie inside the laughter, tracks the hesitation in half-hearted compliments. And when you enter rooms, people feel it, that you are not easy to shape, that you are not seeking mirrors anymore, because you are the mirror. You hold your perception like a blade, polished, precise, and unwilling to be distorted again. And those who once tried to bend it, they now avoid eye contact, not because they fear you, but because they can no longer manage what you've mastered. So protect it. That perception you reclaimed, guard it like a crown, because people will always try to revise your story to make their guilt feel justified. Don't let them. Speak with conviction. Move with intention. And when they call you changed, say thank you. Because the old you they could control was an illusion, and now you walk in full focus, sharpness restored, narrative reclaimed. You no longer ask, was I wrong? You ask, why did they want me to believe I was? And that shift, that terrifying clarity, is how you ended the war. You didn't just win it, you rewrote it with your own pen, from your own eyes, on your own terms.